Hello and hi. Hello. Hi. Hi. How are you? It's me and I am here and I've got a great episode of Stand Up coming your way with one of our favorite guests, the great Cay Johnston joins me today. Also, I tagged my appearance on Chicago's The Joan Esposito Show. I was her guest yesterday and I made another blockbuster, very impressive appearance that I tagged on to the end of today's show after my conversation with Cay Johnston, and that begins at about 31 minutes into today's show. Always love to talk to the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter. Another awesome conversation today. Also, today is Veterans Day, so thanks to all the veterans out there. If you know any, you might want to reach out and say, hi, how are you? How are you doing? Is everything all right? Is there anything I can do for you? It's a federal holiday. Banks are closed, etc. My daughter is home from school today, and so I hope that maybe you get a day off. Maybe you have a day off as well. There you have it. I've got a great episode for you. We had a great hangout last night. We did a Monday night hangout because I was unable to do the Thursday last week, so it was great to see folks last night. We had a great conversation for almost 2 hours and lots of laughs as well. If you are a paid subscriber, you can go back and listen or watch last night's hangout. I'll include a link in today's email. Send me your vitamin N, everybody. Yeah, get outside. It's all right. I know it's cold in a lot of places, but it's awesome out there. So get out and let the nature wash all over you and take a photo and send it to me. Keep them coming because I include one every day from a listener from all over the country and often all over the world. So reach out, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Send your vitamin N to me. And finally, just want to mention that I should be live. I'm scheduled to be live today at 11 East with Dr. Aaron Carroll. So if you're listening to this Tuesday, November 11th, anytime before then, check us out. If you're listening after then, should be up on YouTube, youtube.com/standupwithpete with the most of my other interviews. All right. Well, let's get to the headlines I've got for you, the clip show, or what I call this block of news, the shit show, because I tell you all the terrible, mostly terrible things that are happening in the world, in America, but those are the exceptions. There's infinite acts of loving kindness happening all the time, including, I hope, for you and by you. So there you go. This is what I've got for you. Of course, the shutdown set to end. Lots of Democrats very angry. We talked about it yesterday. The 40-day logjam finally broke. 8 Democratic senators split with the party to strike a deal with Republicans. Their plan would reverse federal layoffs and ensure retroactive pay for furloughed workers, but it doesn't include Democrats' central demand, the extension of Obamacare subsidies that are slated to expire at the end of the year. In response, Democrats from every ideological corner rebuked the reopening plan, which left them all but powerless in negotiations over health tax credits and other issues, and the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, is in trouble. He described the deal as inadequate. Bernie Sanders called it a policy and political disaster. Some other responses from some of the players. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says the average monthly SNAP benefit is $177 a person. The average ACA benefit is up $550 a person per month. People want us to hold the line for a reason. This is not a matter of appealing to a base. It's about people's lives. Working people want leaders whose word means something. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, says, this is not a deal. It's an empty promise. Trump and his Republican Congress are making health care more expensive for the middle class and ending it for working families. Time for Democrats to stand tall for affordable health care. Congressman Ro Khanna said, Senator Chuck Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop health care premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you do? Bernie Sanders, a vote in the Senate is totally meaningless gesture. You can get up to 100 votes here. It won't mean anything because the House is not going to take it up. Elizabeth Warren, I think this is a terrible mistake. The American people want us to stand and fight for health care, and that's what I believe we should do. Senator Chris Murphy, standing up to a tyrant who is willing to impose pain as leverage to compel loyalty or acquiescence is hard. You can convince yourself that yielding stops the pain and brings you back to, quote, normal, but there is no normal. Submission emboldens the tyrant. The threat grows. And finally, Chuck Schumer, however this vote turns out, this fight will and must continue. Democrats must fight. Lots more to say about the shutdown and reaction to it. We had a great talk about it at last night's hangout. Of course, Bill Boyle was on the show talking about it yesterday. I'm going to move on to some of the other news stories out there that I think matter a lot, including what's going on at the Supreme Court. I think we should mention that yesterday they declined to review that Kim Davis lady, her petition asking the justice to overturn gay marriage, Obergefell decision from 2015, well, the expected denial came yesterday via the court's routine order list, accounting the latest action on pending appeals. It would have taken 4 justices to grant a review. No justices noted any dissent from the denial. So there's that. Also at the Supreme Court yesterday, they said they would hear a challenge to Mississippi's counting of mail-in ballots received after Election Day, a case that could upend mail-in ballot rules in dozens of states, creating chaos leading up to the 2026 election. So that is a big uh-oh and one to watch. A federal judge in Oregon on Friday issued a permanent injunction barring the Trump administration from deploying the National Guard on the streets of Portland in response to protests against the president's immigration policies. We learned yesterday at least 3 U.S. military aircraft, including a heavily armed attack plane, have begun flying missions out of El Salvador's main international airport, an expansion of the extraordinary U.S. troop buildup in the Caribbean, according to an analysis of satellite images, air traffic control communications, and flight tracking data. Good journalism there. And also, the U.S. military killed 6 people on Sunday in 2 more strikes on boats suspected of smuggling drugs in the eastern Pacific Ocean. More murders. The Secretary of Defense DUI hire Pete Hegseth announced that these strikes had happened. The latest strikes raised the death toll in the campaign to 76 people in 19 attacks in the Pacific and Caribbean since early September. Also learned yesterday that Teddy Roosevelt, our president, has granted Hungary a 1-year exemption from sanctions the United States has imposed on countries buying Russian oil after a meeting with the Hungarian prime minister at the White House on Friday, because his majesty is a big fan of Viktor Orban. So sure does like him. That's such an awful thing right there. The Congressional Budget Office, lawmakers' nonpartisan bookkeeper, was hacked by a suspected foreign actor, according to an agency spokeswoman, potentially exposing the key financial research that Congress uses to craft legislation. And finally, a federal court dismissed a lawsuit against pollster Ann Selzer over her pre-election poll showing Kamala Harris leading Trump in Iowa during the final days of the 2024 election. Those are the headlines that I've gathered for you for today. Let's get to the clips, the sound here in the shit show. Starting with NBC's Late Night with Seth Meyers, and we'll get to the jokes first and then the harder stuff.
Picture gained attention online last week of President Trump standing still while a guest collapsed during an Oval Office event. Look at him. That's how I look waiting for the subway when 2 people are screaming at each other behind me. President Trump recapped former President Joe Biden's administration yesterday in a Truth Social post that he titled Auto Pen that began, quote, "Sleepy Joe Biden was by far the worst president in American history. Okay, man, I think it's time to retire Sleepy Joe. Bears don't sleep this well." A group of 8 Senate Democrats broke last night with party leadership to support an agreement that would fund the government through January and does not include an extension for enhanced Obamacare tax credits. God, they're so bad at this. It's like going to a car dealership, seeing it's $30,000 and saying, "I'll give you $50, but you have to sleep with my wife." President Trump attended the Washington Commanders' Detroit Lions game yesterday, and Air Force One did a stadium flyover, so at least one plane took off this week. When asked yesterday... You guys all took the bus here? Everybody here took the bus? Okay. When asked yesterday during the Fox broadcast of the Washington Commanders game who his favorite team was, President Trump said, quote, "So I love the Jets and I love the Giants." Wow, you can just say you don't like football. During the same game, President Trump said the country is doing great and added prices are coming way down, which is a hell of a thing to say to a crowd of people drinking $14 beers. President Trump posted a photo on Truth Social yesterday of the interior of the White House with an arrow pointing to a set of gold curtains with the caption, quote, "The main entrance to the new ballroom at the White House." So I guess thanks for the arrow. You know the only thing better than an arrow and making you look somewhere? Giant gold curtains. In a new interview, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said that if the government shutdown continues, a substantial number of people will miss celebrating the holidays with their families. To be fair, it will have negative effects, too.
All right, there you go, Seth Meyers. Last night, I thought that was very funny, as always. And now let's get to something a little bit more serious, commentary from Keith Boykin. This was a 3-minute clip from his segment on these streets, which should win awards on Instagram. Again, I don't agree with every single clip I play here, obviously, or endorse it necessarily, but I think it's worth sharing with you to give you a wide range of viewpoints here. And this is Keith Boykin's.
Democrats had all the leverage. 40 days into a Republican government shutdown, the public furious, the polls on their side, and 8 Senate Democrats still caved. Because this ain't about one vote. It's about a system designed to protect the powerful from the outrage of the powerless. They just won a huge election that threw out Republicans from Mississippi to Georgia to Virginia. Trump was doing all the wrong things. Flights were being canceled. Workers weren't being paid while he was partying at Mar-a-Lago, redecorating the White House, and fighting all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to take food away from hungry kids. But Democrats gave up all that leverage for a freaking promise. Not a policy, a promise of a vote in December to protect health care. Retiring Senator Jeanne Shaheen said Democrats got a guaranteed vote. That's not a win. That's a calendar appointment. And 80-year-old Dick Durbin said it's not a defeat because Obamacare became a major national topic. Excuse me, Senator, but people don't need hot topics on C-SPAN. They need health care. Yes, I'm glad that Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer voted against the deal this time. But the fact that 8 members of his caucus supported it proves he has no control over them, and he should resign. Dick Durbin is the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. If Schumer wanted to stop the deal, he could have threatened Durbin's leadership assignment. Yet he didn't. But don't be fooled. The problem is bigger than Schumer or these 8 Democrats. It's about a system that lets the people win just enough to keep them engaged, but not enough to keep them empowered. And frankly, it's starting to look a little scripted. 6 of the 8 Democrats who caved on Sunday already folded back in March. They keep shuffling the villains, but the result remains the same. Remember 4 years ago when Arizona Democrat Kyrsten Sinema walked onto the Senate floor with her designer bag on her shoulder and did her little curtsy as she turned her thumbs down on raising the minimum wage for working families? Some people thought if Democrats could just get rid of Sinema and Joe Manchin in West Virginia, then they could get things done. But there's always someone, right? From Joe Lieberman killing the public option on health care in 2009 to John Fetterman normalizing Trump in 2025, there's always just the right number of politicians to stop the people's progress. The so-called moderates who confuse compromise with courage, who act like bipartisanship is a trophy, when it's really just a tactic. Since FDR in the 1930s, the Democratic Party has stood for jobs, health care, and housing. But in recent decades, there's always a Judas waiting in the wings to sabotage the party's goals. And the worst part is that the party's leaders let them get away with it in the name of preserving a big tent. But what's the point of having a big tent if you don't use it to do big things? Thank goodness for strong voices like Jasmine Crockett and others, but they can't do it alone. Republicans punish their dissenters and primary them. Democrats pander to their dissenters and reward them. So what do we do now? Do we need a new party that actually fights for working people? Do we need to take over the Democratic Party from the inside? Do we need to tear down the structures that keep producing the same cowardice, the filibuster, the billionaire donors, maybe even the Senate itself? Because this isn't about one bad vote. It's about a system designed to make sure bold ideas die quietly in compromise, while polite politicians get rewarded for surrender. And until somebody decides to break that system, not beg it for mercy, but break it, this story is going to keep repeating itself again and again. One curtsy, one cave-in, one empty promise at a time.
Yeah, good stuff from Keith Boykin, as always. Here are a few of the senators that voted to vote with Republicans and reopen the government. Let's start with New Hampshire's Jeanne Shaheen on CNN.
I introduced a bill to extend the premium tax credits. That's my legislation. I did that in the very beginning. Introduced the 2 extensions. That was my first legislation this year, and I intend to continue to fight for that. And hopefully the Republicans may hear us. But all those people who opposed this agreement, staying in a shutdown mode was not getting us anywhere. And they need to train their fire on the people who are responsible. That's President Donald Trump, it's Speaker Johnson, and it's the Republicans who have blocked every attempt to get health care. We need to be working together. That's what I intend to do.
All right, there she is on CNN, or I think that was CNN. Now here she is on Fox News with Brian Kilmeade yesterday.
Chuck Schumer, your leader on the Senate, said, I cannot support a continuing resolution that fails to address health care. I am voting no. Did you do this outside leadership, and was there a big push for you not to join the others and break the 60 threshold?
No, we kept leadership informed throughout. And I think it's important to remember who's responsible for why we got into this shutdown. We are here because we are concerned about the health care costs rising significantly on millions of Americans. And we didn't have any indication before the shutdown started that our Republican colleagues were willing to address it. Now, Speaker Johnson is going to have to bring the House back in. He's been AWOL since the beginning of September when we were in the middle of the shutdown. Leader Thune has agreed that we will have a bill that we will write that will give us an opportunity to work on those health care costs. And we believe there are a lot of Republicans, including a lot of Trump supporters, who want to see us do something about this because their costs are going up.
All right, there you go. There's Jeanne Shaheen, couple clips. Now let's hear from Hillary Clinton's former running mate who lost to Donald Trump. He's worried he wasn't going to be able to sleep anymore because he had to face all these people who were not getting paid. This is Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia,
who did break ranks last night. I asked him if he expected the backlash that he's getting today. This is what he told me.
I got the first good night's sleep last night that I've gotten since October 1 because I wasn't worried about being able to look Capitol Police in the eye when I walked in or what a furloughed federal worker would say to me at church or what somebody would say to me about their SNAP benefits. When you're in shutdown, it's always bad because you're one of 535 plus one who have some responsibility for it.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Well, here is the clip that went kind of viral yesterday because it's such a backfire. It's such a terrible moment or thing to say. It's the senator from Maine who is not a registered Democrat, calls himself an independent, but he caucuses with Democrat, usually a pretty reasonable guy. It's Angus King saying standing up to the bully doesn't actually work. What?
You have to go back to what the strategy was at the beginning of the shutdown. There were two goals, both of which I support. One was standing up to Donald Trump. The other was getting some resolution on the ACA premium tax credit issue. The problem was the shutdown wasn't accomplishing either goals, and there was there was zero likelihood that it was going to. In terms of standing up to Donald Trump, the shutdown actually gave him more power, Exhibit A being what he's done with SNAP and SNAP benefits across the country. Oh, by the way, Joe, you're going to love this. Guess who's getting paid during the shutdown? Not the park rangers or air traffic controllers, the ICE agents. Under special law, under that big, awful bill that they passed last summer, the ICE agents are being paid. Nobody else is. So standing up to Donald Trump didn't work. It actually gave him more power.
Oh, it didn't work. Gave him more power. Well, then what should we do? What a terrible, stupid thing to say. So bad. All right, let's go to the Speaker of the House, Christian nationalist Mike Johnson was talking to CNN's Jake Tapper, and he's trying to have it both ways and whether or not they're going to actually hold a vote for the ACA subsidies that the Senate promised. Will Mike Johnson do it? I don't think he's going to do it.
We'd like to bring back to the table because that will actually solve the problem and not just subsidize insurance companies.
So you're not committing to bringing up a bill that deals with the Obamacare subsidies before they expire?
I'm not committing to it or not committing to it. What I'm saying is that we do a deliberative process. That's the way this always works, and we have to have time to do that, and we will in a bipartisan fashion.
All right, there you go, Mike Johnson. And let's go to commentator Rick Wilson with Maya May yesterday talking about this. I just thought it was funny.
Chuck Schumer is a human quail. He's always trying to die politically. When your opponent has taken his dick out and has set it on fire and is trying to put the fire out with an ice axe, let him continue. That's Sun Tzu. It's a complicated translation.
I was like, I had not gotten to that chapter of 48 Laws of Power.
When your opponent is hanging himself, let him continue. This will kill every bit of momentum we just built coming out of this year if they shut this, if they compromise with Trump.
Also,
they're so dumb about this shit.
If they cave now, it makes it look like it was the Democrat shutdown because, the Democrats took action, and so now it's over.
He has never understood the old conception of the Senate of my honorable friend on the other side of the aisle. They sent people to kill you. They do not care about human life. Mm-hmm. They want to destroy you. They want to break you and destroy your party forever.
All right, just a little bit from Rick Wilson of Miami. Now let's go to Congressman Ro Khanna, who is the first to call for Chuck Schumer's resignation from leadership. This is on Breaking Points with Crystal Ball.
I think the point he makes there, too, about Chuck Schumer refusing to even say who he voted for in New York City, I think it's an important one as well. Because if you're going to be a leader of the Democratic Party and the Democratic base is saying, hey, this is Zohran Mamdani, this is our guy. Like, we like this guy. We like the direction he's going for. We're going to vote for him in the primary. We're going to show up in record-breaking numbers to vote for him in the general election, make sure that he wins. And you can't even say that you voted for the Democratic candidate. I mean, how out of step are you with your own voters in the party, let alone, your own caucus, let alone, colleagues such as you? But he's also, and most importantly, wildly out of step with where his own voters are within the Democratic Party.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, look, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. You had Chuck Schumer cheerleading into the war in Iraq. You've had Chuck Schumer cheerleading for a blank check to Netanyahu. You've had Chuck Schumer betraying us on the first shutdown. You then had Chuck Schumer given multiple opportunities after Zohran won the primary to at least endorse him, even if it was a pro forma endorsement. He doesn't do that. And now he's not even willing to fight to make sure that the ACA subsidies don't increase. So to your earlier question about are there difficult questions on SNAP benefits and troop pay, of course there are. And maybe if this was the only context, Chuck Schumer would have some grace and goodwill and say, okay, we disagree with this deal, but it's not enough to call for you to step down. But this is the culmination of someone who just doesn't get it, who doesn't get how much people are hurting, who doesn't get where the base of this party is, who doesn't get how upset this party has been that we're giving all this money to overseas wars and not doing health care here, who certainly is never going to support Medicare for all. He's just out of touch. He's not the future of the party.
All right, that was him breaking up on their show, not mine. I promise you that. Here's Senator Bernie Sanders.
8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to allow them to go forward on this continuing resolution. And to my mind, this was a very, very bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises health care premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for health care. Number 2, it paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid in the Affordable Care Act. Studies show that will mean that some 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily. And all of that was done to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism. That is what the American people wanted, but tonight that is not what happened. So we've got to go forward, do the best that we can to try to protect working class people, to make sure that the United States not only does not throw people off of health care, but ends the absurdity of being the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. We got a lot of work to do. But to be honest with you, tonight was not a good night. Thank you.
Yes. All right. That was from the night of the agreement was announced. All right. Now here is commentator Julie Rosinski, who fashions herself an establishment Democrat, also calling for Chuck Schumer's resignation on the CNN.
Yes, Chuck Schumer should go. I'm sorry to say Chuck Schumer should go. I've voted for him many times. I am ideologically quite aligned with where he is as a senator, but he's no longer capable of running this caucus. He's no longer capable of leading the Democratic Party. I am an establishment Democrat, and I'm here to say that Bernie Sanders is much more in line with where I and many other Senate Democrats are today than Chuck Schumer is. And, if you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you. So that's just to underscore exactly how furious Democrats are today for putting the country through this without having an out.
All right, there you go. A bunch of reactions to the shutdown, a wide range for you. And now let's head over to the chief economic advisor to our commander-in-chief. It's Kevin Hassett with his weird nasally voice outside the White House yesterday trying to answer a question from Caitlin Collins about prices and inflation. And listen to this. You can actually hear his back brake as he tries to twist everything around.
Says that grocery prices are down. What numbers is he basing that on, given that's not true, and even Marjorie Taylor Greene has acknowledged that it's not accurate?
Right. Well, I guess the question, inflation is down. It's one of those things that very often when people talk about economics, they slip derivatives, as we say. And so the point is that inflation is way down. It averaged 5% under Joe Biden. It's running at about 2.5% right now. And the thing, though, is that people's purchasing power dropped by more than $3,000 because of the inflation of the last 4 years. It's up by about $1,200 this year. And so purchasing power is improving, but we haven't closed the entire gap, and that's why people still feel the pain of the higher prices.
Grocery prices are up.
Well, not everything. I mean, egg prices are down. We used to talk a lot about those. In fact, it was your first question here in the White House. Why haven't you covered the lower egg prices?
Well, household prices, we certainly have covered that. Energy as well, but grocery prices are up about 1.4% since Trump took
office. Which is a big decline in the rate of inflation of grocery prices.
They're down and they're up.
Inflation is down is what he means.
Yeah, you're just lying. You know you're lying. He knows he's lying. All right, here is one take on the idea proposed by the administration of a 50-year mortgage. Like, who's going for that? Not even Fox Business or Fox News' one of their main money guys, Charles Payne. This is what he had to say about it.
Okay, so the big word from last week was affordability, and I really wanted to have you on so you could define affordability for us. But here we go. The White House is floating this idea. Bill Pulte is saying, thanks to President Trump, we can indeed work on the 50-year mortgage, a complete game changer. How does that work in dollars? Here you go. 30-year fixed mortgage right now. You're paying $2,038 a month, principal and interest on a $400,000 home. At the bottom, under 50 years, you'd save a couple $100 a month at $1,822 principal and interest. That is proposed. Do you like this idea?
I do not like this idea. And again, it depends on how much the house costs and what. But if you just took a 4% interest rate, for a 30-year, it would be $2,300. For a 50-year, it would be $1,900. So you're saving almost $500 a month in terms of affordability. But by the time you finish paying this bad boy off, the 30-year, you pay $359,000 versus a 50-year, almost $700,000, right?
Oh.
So it's just a gargantuan difference just to make people feel better, and that's not the way to do this, right? There's so many other ways. I feel so strongly about the momentum that we'll have going into next year. The one big, beautiful bill kicks in. We'll have a more accommodative Federal Reserve. I think economic activity is going to build. Companies will be encouraged to build here because they'll be able to write a lot of that off. I think we're on the precipice of an economic boom, and with lower mortgage rates, that will help the housing market a lot. So I would rather see President Trump do some other things with that tariff money.
All right. There you go. Charles Payne yesterday on Fox News. Even he doesn't like it. All right, now let's get to some more jokes finally here. I like to start on a laugh if we can, and end on a laugh if we can in the shit show. It's Jimmy Kimmel Live. They're doing 80s week all week on that show, apparently.
Here in the present, we are on day 41 of the Trump government shutdown. Democrats refuse to sign on to a bill that would force millions of Americans off their health care and make it much more expensive for those who can't afford health care. So Democrats drew a line in the sand. They said, we are not going over this. And today, after 41 days, they pulled out a shovel and a bucket and they ate all that sand and got nothing for it. Isn't that great? You know what they got? They got a promise from Republicans in the Senate to hold a vote on health care sometime in the future. And if there's one thing we know about Trump and his merry band of sycophants, it's that their word is as good as gold. I mean, it is incredible at his age that Chuck Schumer is still able to bend over so far. Chuck Schumer is basically every parent who tells their kid, no more iPad, that's it. Next thing you know, he's playing Roblox at the dinner table. This was such a big cave by the Democrats, Bruce Wayne offered to buy it. Dick Durbin, the Democrat, told Senate Majority Leader John Thune that he was, quote, counting on him to keep his word on this agreement. He said he assured me he would, which is exactly what Lucy said to Charlie Brown with the football. So now the House will vote, and we'll see how that goes. Turns out all Trump had to do was threaten to starve poor people, and he got his way. I'm sure he'll never do it again, though. Speaker Mike Johnson praised the bill, which is kind of all you need to know. He said he's glad Democrats are finally ready to do what the American people have been asking them to do for weeks. Great. And then maybe you'll finally be ready to do what the American people have been asking you to do for months and release the Epstein files.
Yeah, great point by Jimmy Kimmel last night, because that's right back where we're at, focused on what's going to happen with the Epstein files, what we're going to learn, if anything, or if they ever get released. But everybody's going to be clamoring and not stop asking about it. Lawrence O'Donnell went right back to it, reminding people last night on his very popular show on MSNBC. By the way, he and Rachel Maddow basically defended Chuck Schumer. So, yeah, interesting times. Interesting analysis, and how we react to things is sometimes different based on who you are in terms of, are you in the media? Are you an elected? Are you just an ordinary American? And we talked a little bit about that last night at our hangout as well. That's all I've got for you in the shit show. I cannot do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Right now, join over 750 other amazing human beings. Become a paying subscriber. Join our community. Always available to connect with people on the Discord platform every day. Don't be alone. Join the stand-up community. Hope to see you at Thursday night's hangout as well. All right, let's get to my first guest. You can watch this interview. We did it live yesterday on YouTube or Substack. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, author of several books, and he created the DC Report. You should go check that out. A great journalistic endeavor. He is now a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. You know him. You love him. We love him. Let's do it right now with the great David Cay Johnston. And I swear we didn't plan to wear a very similar shirt, but those of you watching on YouTube or wherever will notice that we have a very similar style, a very similar appearance. Good to see you, sir.
Beards and all, but I'm not bald.
Oh, wow.
I'm getting there.
Is a real disparity in our images. Yeah, that's a good point. It's great to see you. Thank you for doing this. I know you're always very busy. I appreciate your time and expertise as always. Haven't seen you since Farm Jam, and it's great to see you.
Yep, that was fun.
Yeah, we had a great time. Everybody loved that. We're still there, some of us in some ways. Lots to talk about. A lot has happened since then. That was early September, which means it was 10 years ago in news time, David.
Yes, that's about right.
Let's work our way backwards and take a look at this government shutdown, what it meant. You've covered these over and over. You've seen them. You know what they do. You know the inner workings of government really well. You obviously understand the politics. Was it worth it? Do you think Democrats caved? Do you think they won anything? What are your hot takes or quick thoughts on the shutdown and how it's ended?
There's an awful lot being posted today that the Democrats caved. I'm not sure that's the way to look at this. And so start thinking about it not as 10 Democrats and independents decided to go with the Republicans, which overcomes the filibuster problem. What if Schumer had said, I want all Democrats and the independents who caucus with us to move together? And if you do that, you begin to see this in a little bit different light. There's no way that the Trump-publicans were ever going to vote to extend the tax credits for poor people. They want to take health care away from 17 million Americans. And if you have any doubts about that, look at what Trump did Friday night on Truth Social. He ordered states, particularly Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, who's a Democrat, to stop providing full SNAP benefits by having the state fill in for the delayed federal money. Cruelty is a fundamental feature of the Trump administration, and the Republicans have gone along with this. So if you know they're never going to vote to provide subsidies for the poorest Americans to get health care, which means for a lot of people who were paying either nothing or maybe $200 a month, they're going to get a bill now of $400 or $800, or in one case I've seen $1,400 a month, which means they will go without health care. Then at some point, you want to get what they got, which is the promise of a vote in December on extending the tax credit for Obamacare. It'll be interesting to see if they actually get the vote. And this is an opportunity for the Democrats to thoroughly tag the Republicans with, you are a Sun King of France, Marie Antoinette administration who holds fancy parties and withholds food. Let them eat cake.
Two people whose political analysis I really respect agree with you. They said it differently, but both Josh Marshall and Heather Cox Richardson said, I don't think we should be looking at it as Democrats caving, but see how much progress Democrats have made and leverage they've gained. They looked at it differently. My friend Bill Boyle, who I had on the show too, as well. So I'm really happy to hear that that's your analysis as well.
Yeah, let me just add one other little point to this, and that is when they began cutting flights because the air traffic controllers who weren't being paid weren't showing up for work, that changed the dynamic because people who fly a lot, they have political voice. And you saw a huge shift in upset. This is damaging commerce. This is damaging people who have, in the view of some people, nothing to do with this fight, when I think it involves every one of us. But I think that the move to reduce air flights, when Trump could have said, no, we're going to send military air controllers to civilian airports. And everybody in the news missed that. I was kind of surprised. Why was nobody reporting that in the past, when we've had shortages, we send military air controllers to civilian airports? But that was, from the point of view of the Trump Republicans, a smart move to change the dynamic. And there were some indications that public opinion was beginning to shift away from the Democrats. So they needed, in my view, to act promptly and decisively. And now they have an opportunity. But of course, the Democrats have a long, well-established history of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Well, let's talk about by the way, I'm just seeing news breaking now that apparently the Speaker of the House, Cay Johnston, planning to swear in Rep-elect Adelita Grijalva before the government funding vote. That would mean I have to ask you about your thoughts on the discharge petition on the Epstein files. What is this is huge. Like, it's going to happen. What's going to happen, David? Talk to me.
The once 218 members, a majority of the House, sign on to onto a discharge petition, the Epstein files are supposed to then begin the procedure of being made public. You can be sure that Donald Trump will do everything he can to delay this, to interfere with it. If and when photos are released that show Donald Trump or video in compromising positions with naked or half-naked underage girls, you know what he's going to say. Fake image, artificial intelligence. Without a doubt. But there's another aspect to this story. I don't understand why it hasn't been developed by my fellow journalists. When the FBI or any law enforcement agency conducts a search of your property and they take things, they're required to either return to you the originals, which they may need to keep for prosecution reasons, or to give you certified copies of the originals. So the Epstein estate should have the photographic and video evidence that Michael Wolff says exists and that other evidence, the young women in particular, say exists. Why haven't the Democrats gone to the estate and said, what have you got? And if you don't have it, how about you sue for it and we'll raise money to pay the costs?
I wonder why.
Ultimately, this stuff will come out unless something horrendous happens. I mean, imagine if Pam Bondi decides we're going to just trash all this on the idea that there's no more prosecutable crimes. The statute of limitations is passed. A possibility that she might do.
There are two things about the Epstein files that I think a lot about and how Trump could be implicated. And they are this holdout of bringing in this congresswoman because of the discharge petition. That's on one hand. On the other hand, and we learned more news about it last night, that he moved Ghislaine Maxwell to a more minimum security prison. And now Jamie Raskin got letters she was writing her family. She's much happier and more comfortable there. Those 2 points directly look to protect the president. Why would he move her? Right. Why? And why aren't we only talking about that, or at least a lot more? She's the second worst person in the Epstein scandal and saga. Right.
Yeah, I could actually make the case. I think she's worse because she's a woman and she was procuring these girls.
Agreed.
But this was done obviously to try and control her. Now, by the way, Donald Trump would be foolish to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. What would be smart from his point of view would be to give her clemency, to release her from prison. If he pardons her, she no longer has Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination. So she can be called to testify before Congress or before a prosecutor's grand jury. And if she refuses to answer or she lies, she can end up right back in prison. But if she only gets clemency, she can continue to claim Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. And let's never forget that Donald Trump, who's taken the Fifth Amendment more than 500 times in several different cases, 500 times total, Trump always said anybody who takes the Fifth Amendment is obviously guilty. That's not true as a matter of law or philosophy, but since he said it, it's reasonable to hold him to the standard, he must be guilty of being a child rapist.
It is begging a lot of questions. It's not too, a lot of dots out there that are very well connected. And we also heard Eric Swalwell, I keep thinking about this too, Congressman Eric Swalwell said a couple weeks ago that 35 more Republicans are going to sign on to this. And what it means is, what I'm hearing, and just get your take on this real quick, Trump's not going to be there forever. And you don't want to be holding a bag to protect a pedophile. And I wonder if you think there's any merit to that opinion.
I think that's a real serious problem if you believe we'll get out of this without losing our democracy. I'll also bet that right now, today, 1 or 2 or 3 of the Republicans who've signed on to the discharge petition are coming under the most intense pressure to withdraw so that there'll only be 217 members of Congress and the petition fails. And, we're going to run somebody against you. We're going to ruin your life forever. We have something on your son-in-law, and we're going to go after him, and now your grandchildren will suffer. You can be sure that both normal arm twisting and serious threats of an extortion type are taking place today.
Let me just ask you a couple financial or economic questions. We've talked about the shutdown and obviously the Epstein consequences, that scandal. Just got to ask you real quick. One of the reasons I want to talk to you today, I just wanted to get your reaction live to the idea that has been floated by our commander-in-chief of a 50-year mortgage. Are you familiar? Did you hear that they put this out?
No, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, shoot.
A 50-year mortgage on what?
A home. I'm sorry.
For home. So homeowners can afford to buy a house.
Yes, and then pay for the rest of their life.
One of the worst things that's happened to this country is that the 30-year mortgage. You pay far more in interest, even if you have a very low interest rate, than the principal of the house. And if you are a homeowner with a mortgage, you want to do everything you can to pay that thing off as fast as you can. And by the way, 95% of homeowners are not eligible now under Trump's tax law to deduct the interest or the property taxes. So it's just a debt. If all you can do is pay $10 a month extra on your mortgage, do it. It will save you a fortune in the long run. But a 50-year mortgage is just another scheme to avoid dealing with the problem. And the real problem is we haven't built enough housing. That's something the federal government could help. The reason we got all that housing built during the boomer generation when I was a little kid was because of federal help. We had GI loans. We had California, a thing called CalVet loans, and we had subsidized mortgages for people. But 50 years just means you're going to be on the hamster wheel forever until you die instead of paying your house off. And for most people in America, the only significant asset they're going to own is their home. So you really want to get that paid off very quickly, just as fast as you can. And so any scheme to say, let's have longer term mortgages it's a scheme to make sure the bankers continue to collect revenue and you continue to be on the hamster wheel until, you're ready to die.
Also suggested giving out $2,000 checks. Trump, do you hear about that?
Yes. And Trump wants, of course, his name to be on the check. This at a time when the government is borrowing more than $1 trillion so that the billionaire class and the centimillionaire class can have tax cuts. Yeah, here's a little thing to think about. We're going to spend over $7 trillion this year. The income tax, the individual income tax, only brings in about $2.5 trillion. So where's the rest of that coming from? Well, part of it's borrowing. And part of that borrowing is Social Security. When Social Security comes in, they take every dollar of it and use it to finance tax cuts for the richest Americans, building up the obligation that Congress eventually has to meet to Social Security beneficiaries. And as things stand now, somewhere around 2033 or 2034, people's Social Security benefits are going to be cut by a third, round numbers. There's no reason for this. It's because of two things. When Ronald Reagan changed Social Security and raised everybody's taxes and made people like me pay in advance for our benefits by charging more than the cost, and therefore reduced our ability to save, he said that 90% of wages should be subject to Social Security. Well, only about 80% are. So if we just raised it to the 90% level and had kept it there all these years, Social Security would be fine. But there's another way to think about this. You pay the Medicare tax, 1.45% for most people, on every dollar you earn, and your employer puts up 1.45%, so it's 2.9. If you make over, I think it's about $300,000 a year, you pay a higher tax, 2.25% in round numbers. It goes to the top. So we have several hundred people in this country every year who are paid more than $100 million for their labor for a single year. They pay on every dollar. Well, let's raise Social Security taxes to cover every single dollar of compensation. And if we did that, we could raise the minimum Social Security benefit, there is no minimum now, to the equivalent of the minimum wage, which is in round numbers $16,000 a year, $15,000 a year. There are lots of people who get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year in Social Security. They could suddenly get about $1,250 a month. Secondly, we wouldn't have to worry about running out of money.
Well, your answers are so obvious. Getting policies like that passed is a lot harder, obviously. And as soon as that we're talking about policy and finance, and you can speak to all these issues as well as anybody in the country, really, I do want to get your take, your general broad take, now talking about the next thing I want to discuss with you, the elections last week, your broad take on Mamdani and the whole DSA idea, Democratic Socialist. You know, I'm trying to, in my conversations and everything that I post and talk about, I'm trying to move the Overton window, have a different conversation than in using terms like moderate Democrat or progressive or liberal or any of it. I like policy. I like talking about the ideas, and I love arguing about them. I'm not no expert on anything, but when it comes to the policy proposals that Mamdani has made for New York City, that Bernie Sanders has offered for the country, and many others, it's not radical to me. It's normal in Europe, and it's kind of like things that FDR suggested in the 1940s, I guess. And so I wish we could talk about it in a way that didn't make it sound like ideas for free buses, which are a capitalist's dream in my mind, because now people have more money to spend and buy your bullshit as well as work longer hours for your bullshit. We could talk about childcare. We could talk about all these other ideas that to me are not radical. Other countries have them. Obviously, healthcare. How do you talk about, or how do you think we should talk about what it means to be a democratic socialist and these ideas that are being proposed by Mamdani and others?
I'm not big on labels, Pete. I want to go back just for a second on one Social Security point, not to lose it. I'm sure some people heard what I said and went, oh, we're going to give $1 million a year check to somebody in Social Security. The higher your income, the less the benefits you get. It's a regressive payout. So we can cut it way down. But if the price is to pay Bill Gates when he's 65 $1 million a year in Social Security benefits, fine, if it helps poor people. So on Mamdani's positions here, we already have about a half dozen cities that have free buses. Albuquerque is one of them, where one of my sons was an Albuquerque bus driver for a couple of years. So this is not a radical new idea. Many European cities like Amsterdam operate on essentially an honor system. You know, you get on, you're supposed to tap on and off. New Zealand has that, but if you don't, unless there's a monitor there, nothing happens. And if we had free buses, it would probably mean somewhat fewer automobiles, especially if we ever adopted Michael Bloomberg's idea that Manhattan up to 59th or 96th, whichever street you want to pick, couldn't have private cars except for taxis and Ubers. Traffic would flow better, commerce would improve. We just had free childcare in New Mexico, one of the poorer but blue states in the country. Now, anybody, regardless of income, can get free childcare, preschool. Minneapolis, in Minnesota, they just voted, and I believe they passed, or I'm sorry, it was Colorado, to raise taxes on very wealthy people by a little bit to make sure that every school child gets 2 meals a day at school. And we should be thinking about what makes for a enduring society of healthy people who are not under stress all the time for economic reasons. The debate we're having about college and the cost of college is the totally wrong debate. The debate should be in the 21st century, which is unbelievably more complicated than the 20th century, where scientific knowledge is just exploding all over the world. Even with Trump cutting our investments in science to the bone, the rest of the world is moving ahead. How much education do you need? And if it's only 8th grade, I would say, okay, we make education free, no charge to the parents and the child up to 8th grade. If it's 20 years of education, the same rule should apply. What do you need? And one thing we could change would be college students who don't perform should be treated the way they were in the Vietnam War. I was in college at that time, and the students around me who, were going to college to not be drafted, but they didn't perform and didn't show up for class, they got thrown out. Colleges aren't doing that now, non-performers, because they don't want to lose all that tuition, sure. I presume. So with Mamdani, one of the things Mamdani wants is green groceries and healthy food everywhere in all 5 boroughs of New York City. Well, in Rochester, New York, where I live, 125 years ago, the city fathers treated healthy foods, green groceries, as a public utility. And they spent taxpayer money to make sure that every single residence in the city of Rochester, which was the original boom town, was within walking distance, because people didn't have cars in 1900, within walking distance of a green grocer who had healthy food in the middle of winter. So when you do that and you have people not going so often to fast food joints and bodegas, you're going to reduce diabetes, heart disease, excessive, morbidly obese, overweight. That will create a more productive workforce. That was the reasoning of the Rochester City Fathers 125 years ago. And so, let's talk about policies in terms of benefiting people, and let's get away from this crazy notion. I have on my Facebook page right now a collection of Fox News things somebody else put together of people saying with Mamdani's election, well, the rich are all going to leave the city.
Yeah, right.
They've said that every year since the beginning of human life, and it's just not true. Yeah, wealthy people leave and new ones come. Young people come and then they find someone, and once they have children, most of them leave. Great place to be young and single, not so great to raise children. That's New York. It's going to be that way forever. It's an escalator. You get to the top of the escalator, you step off and go to Florida if you want.
By the way, the vast majority of people who identify as DSA or support these affordability policies are overwhelmingly Gen Z millennials, and it would be really helpful for, middle-aged and older congressmen, policymakers, and pundits to have a conversation with some of them. You're a college professor. You also understand policy, economics, and as you just mentioned, the history of economics in this country and plenty of others. These young people can't afford even what I could afford back in the early aughts before the crash, and certainly not what my parents could afford when it comes to anything. The education, the home, the car, all of it is unaffordable. They're desperate for something else. These ideas are not radical. They're old in many ways, as you just referred. So I just wanted to mention listening to young people would be helpful.
Pete, when I was a young man, because college was free in California, and I got a little bit of money as technically a war orphan. My dad was a 100% disabled veteran of World War II. I got a college education because it was free. And the state even required that all textbooks, any required, had to be in the library. So I didn't even buy textbooks. I saved money by going to the library and reading the books. If you're my grandsons who are between 20 and 34, you can't afford to buy a house. College tuition at a state college is incredibly expensive, except for a couple of places like New York and New Jersey where they've set it up so it's almost free or free if you get good grades. You got to get good grades. You can't afford to buy a house. The house I bought when I was 22 years old with my own money as a newspaper reporter for less than $30,000. That would be about $200,000 today, maybe $2.25. It's now listed on Zillow at $3 million. So we've gotten the economics all messed up here. Yeah. And if you are a Gen Z, what has your life experience been economically? Well, when I was born, there was 9/11. I didn't know about it, but I've heard about it every day of my life. Right. There's all this militarism that grew out of it. Then we had the collapse of the economy because the George Bush administration stopped enforcing banking laws. And if my parents didn't lose their home when I was in grade school, there are kids all around me who I know that happened to them. And then it looks like things are maybe slowly getting better, because by some measures, the 2007 to 10 depression was worse than the Great Depression a century earlier.
Yeah, I've heard that analysis. Yeah.
And then comes COVID. And now Donald Trump. I mean, no wonder you're saying, hey, this capitalism thing doesn't work for me. And politicians need to wake up to that fact.
With the 3 minutes I've got left with you, talk to me about your reporting, your thoughts that you've shared at DC Report on what's happening at the Pentagon in terms of what journalists have access to, their solidarity there, and also these military strikes, these assassinations of we don't know who.
Yeah. So first on that part, Donald Trump is committing murder. A number of retired military lawyers have all said this. I don't know any competent lawyer who understands the Constitution and military law who would view this as anything but murder. Nothing gives the president the right to kill people, and we have very good reason to believe that at least 2 of the boats they blew up, they were just fishermen. There was somebody who was saying, well, why were they out fishing at night? Because the fish come up to feed at night on the jellyfish and other things on the surface, because then the predators can't get them, that they would see them in the daytime. They swim deep in the dark, and then in the daytime, and they come to the surface. But even so, you interdict suspected traffickers. Trump said, well, we can't do that. We can't do that because the boats are so fast. The Coast Guard cutters can't catch them. There's a perfect example of how stupid Donald is. You don't need to chase them from behind. You have all this surveillance, drones, satellite images. You just position the Coast Guard cutters so they suddenly are running into you, and you fire 50-millimeter cannon off the bow of the boat to tell them to stop. And if they don't, then you shoot them. But you're supposed to interdict, inspect, if you find drugs, seize the contraband, and arrest the suspects. And seize the boat, by the way. It's worth money. It is contraband. So this is just murder, plain and simple. And that's why we saw one general retire from the Air Force. It's pretty clear he didn't say that, but people around him are saying that. And then on the second issue of the Pentagon, where you had to sign a letter basically saying, we will only report the official version of events and not ask pesky questions. That's an easily solvable problem. You saw all these reporters walk out. Even Fox and the Wall Street Journal walked out of the Pentagon. The motto of DC Report, the news service David Crook and I started almost 9 years ago now, is covering what politicians do, not just what they say. We will get better coverage of the Pentagon if those reporters now are no longer in the building, start looking at audits, contracts, litigation, congressional research. We'll get much better coverage of the Pentagon. You do not need to be there for everything. And for the official version of events, it's readily available to us. They put out there what they want you to know. We need to be saying to journalists, you got to act on your own repertorial authority. If all you know how to do is take a bunch of facts and organize them into a story that makes sense to people, and you have no knowledge or appreciation of the underlying structure, the law, the economics, you can't do that. Guess what, news organizations? There are plenty of journalists who need work. The fastest disappearing white-collar job in this century in America is journalist. So find people who know how the system works or can learn how it works, can act on their own repertorial authority, and tell them, go dig in the public record for the big stories that are just lying in the open waiting to be found.
There you go. Great lesson. Great spot to end. David Cay Johnston, a great man. Always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Always like being on with you, Pete. You take care.
All right. There you go. David Cay Johnston. Go say hello to him. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. And now a little bonus conversation between me and the longtime journalist, commentator, radio show host from Chicago. It's Joan Esposito, hosts the Joan Esposito Show out there. Somehow they saw me either on TV or somewhere else. I don't know where people find you. They asked me to come on about a month ago, and it was good, real good. So they asked me back. Joan and I had a great conversation. I did my bit about the Overton window and about politics and framing. If you've already heard this or you're done with me, stick with me, you can press stop now. I won't know. You don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to be a bumblebee. But otherwise, I think this is about 20 minutes of my conversation yesterday with Joan Esposito. Here it is.
So these days, my friend, what do you feel is important enough to talk about for public consumption? What are the issues and the happenstances that you think are interesting in this world of ours?
What I'm trying to do everywhere I go, the last few weeks especially, as a result of the midterm elections, as a result of the New York City mayoral election, there was a lot of talk about democratic socialism. So what I'm trying to do, Joan, is talk about political conversation or framing, what we call the Overton window in American politics, which is where we stand on the issues. And when people use words like moderate or liberal or progressive or conservative or MAGA or extremist or radical especially, I think those words mean nothing to most of us, or they mean different things to most of us. And what I'm trying to do is to compare and contrast the different ideologies in American politics in the America that we're currently living in, this authoritarian version that we didn't expect to be in. But on the right now, on the MAGA right, the debate that they're having, the split they're having, is whether or not they should go full hoods off, is how I'm saying it. No more dog whistling about the racism. Right now, there's a fight on the MAGA right between this young, extreme anti-Semite Christian white nationalist named Nick Fuentes and everybody else. And he's burning everybody down, and he's got a huge following, and certain people are having to denounce him. Others are supporting him. It's really important that we frame what the political conversation is. So on the right, they're talking about whether or not they go all the way to taking their hoods off. On the left, we're in progressive conversations in democratic politics, we are talking about how to make people's lives more affordable. And I think that's a really important distinction, that we're over here talking about and debating things like free public buses or childcare or universal pre-K and all of the rest of the issues that we've been discussing, by the way, in America since the 30s. I mean, what they call radical democratic socialism is what I call FDR. If you don't realize the history of this country and public policy, well, you're ignorant. And that's okay. There's still time to learn. But it's not extremist or radical for any politician or policymaker to propose an idea that if it was Europe or Canada or any other wealthy country in the world, they would say, you don't already have that? These ideas are not radical in Canada. They're not radical in France or UK or Israel or Japan. They aren't. These are ideas that make people's lives better. When we all do better, we all do better. You can call it whatever you want. I would rather have a conversation about the actual policies and the ideas. And I certainly don't think it's radical to suggest the idea that, say, public transportation is free. The Staten Island Ferry has been free forever in New York. Buses being free is a capitalist dream. That way people have more money to buy whatever crap you're selling, and they get more time and more incentive to be at the crappy job that you have them working for. So it really, there's ways to talk about these policies that I think everybody could have a discussion where we could learn something, but when we move that window and we call something radical that isn't radical at all in the rest of the world, that they can't believe we don't have it, or that we did actually have it and lost it, from healthcare to education to employment to transportation. There's a lot to discuss, and I'm happy to be in the debate about the fundamental policies of affordability and how to make people's lives better versus whether or not we are going to be Klan members.
I've always suspected these words describing, labeling someone's politics are a problem, because what progressive means to you might not be what progressive means to me. Shortly after I started doing this radio show with Joan Esposito, Live, Local, and Progressive, somebody texted to me, you know, you're not a progressive, you're a liberal. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. And I hate the fact that when Zohran Mamdani won the primary, everyone was so, oh my God, it's the end of the world. He's a democratic socialist. And Charlie Sykes, the conservative columnist, never Trumper, he's usually better than this, because he was like, this is what he calls himself. This is like one of the ideas he has. And now let me tell you what the definition of a democratic socialist is. They want this and they want this. Not this is who Mamdani is, or these are things he's said in the past. But after, he wants free buses. Now let me tell you a definition for democratic socialism. And once you read this definition, man, you are going to be so scared of this guy. And I was like, dude, come on. You're better than that.
No, I mean, the people that criticize them, the Charlie Sykes, anybody over 40 that is criticizing Mamdani should just take a seat and shut up and go talk to a Gen Z millennial for a moment and talk about your life and then talk about their life. You have no idea how hard it is to be a young person. I have an 18 and almost 21-year-old daughter, and the affordability crisis that they are dealing with, the lives that they are going to have to live in this America is not the America that we had. And we have gotten so far, again, going back to that window, we have moved so far to the right when it comes to what I would call just this extreme, unregulated capitalism, where it is so hard to live. I was on an Australian TV show last week, Joan, and my buddy who was the anchor said, Pete just celebrated his 50th birthday, but he looks 78. He's making fun of me. And then the other anchor goes, oh, I don't think he looks a day over 30. And I go, really? If I am only 30, I must have had a really hard life. And she says, she's an Australian anchor, she goes, well, you do live in America. And it was a weird, it was funny and it was fine, but it was a weird moment there when that segment ended. I was like, so the rest of the world understands how much harder it is, the rest of the wealthy countries in the world, to live in America for a lot of us, including white affluent people. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the vessel I'm traveling in. I mean, look at this. I have perfect symmetry in my face. My body fat is 2. I'm in great shape. Don't get me wrong. I'm a white, straight guy. Life is easy. I'm entitled. I'm all the things. But it's not as easy as it should be, especially when it comes to something like healthcare. I'm a healthy guy. I'm really lucky. I take pretty good care of myself, but my health insurance is ridiculous. Everybody's is. So whatever you want to talk about, whether it be housing or rent or food or whatever it is, even if you're doing well, things aren't affordable. So all of these people that have been commentating on politics for years and years and years, that have lived on the right or center right or even center left-ish, let's not have that conversation about let's move the window to talk to what young people are dealing with today. They are in charge now. They're taking over. The olds in the U.S. Senate are on their way out, and they did themselves no favor this week, and they're going to be replaced by people like Mamdani and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jasmine Crockett and so many other young folks who are, I don't know what you want to call them, but they have ideas that will make life a little bit better around healthcare, employment, education, housing, energy, all of the costs of life. And those ideas are working pretty well in Western Europe and Canada. And guess what else? All these things that they want to demonize about democratic socialism, guess what? In the countries where they have these policies, people live longer and happier. Who doesn't want longer and happier? I wish DSA would call itself longer and happier.
One of the things that idea is, Mamdani, one of the reasons I think that there was such a reaction is that there is a feeling in the old guard, and I mean old, that yes, we want young people interested in politics and running for office, but we want them to sound just like us and think just like us and want the exact same things that we want. That's a young person we can get behind. And I think that's what scared the hell out of him with Mamdani. He was a young person, but he didn't just fall into line. He didn't just accept the white papers and the 10 talking points and, the gobbledygook. Yes, I think you need help with this problem. Let me share a white paper with you, and it has a 10-point plan, and it involves tax credits. Let me explain how I'm going to make your life better. Instead, he just said, you know what? Let's make the buses free. Oh, my God. Same message, so much easier to understand. I think that it's hard for people who've done things a certain way and who think a certain way to accept somebody who, oh my God, does it differently. Well, that's no good. Different is always bad, right?
I mean, that's what your ego tells you. That's what experience tells you. That's what life can sometimes teach you. But I don't fall for any of that. I mean, I think it's so arrogant. You look like such an idiot when you act like you know so much more than a young person about anything, and yet you don't know how to unlock your phone and log into TikTok and make a video. I mean, that's the reason why Mamdani won. That's the reason why AOC reigns. That's the reason why all of these young politicians and influencers and content creators and so on are doing so well, because they understand the world we're living in. I would love to dial it back to the 90s and the 80s, get rid of these phones and the internet and social media and everything. But that's ridiculous. Like, how much time are we spending on a fantasy that's never going to happen? This is the world we live in. If you want to sell something, whether it be a product or a message, you better learn how to TikTok. You better learn how to edit video. You better learn how to write a message. You better learn how young people are using their devices. They're not watching television. They're not getting their news from CNN. So if you're not on TikTok and Instagram, you're not alive. You're not in existence. You're not in the running. Mamdani knows that, and so does every other young influential person that wants to run for office. And that's why I think Democrats are going to continue to do better in campaigns. That's why they have to rig every single election and stack the decks so that it's very difficult to elect Democrats, because we certainly know we have way better ideas, obviously. We have way more normal ideas that benefit the vast majority of people, and we know how to sell them. Or I should say they do, because they have harnessed social media and new technology and AI, and the rest of us should get out of the way.
Works for me. I think that my daughter's a perfect example of what you said. You know, I said to her, I mean, for 20 years, I was a journalist.
How old is she?
Before I became an opinionated radio person. And my kids have been always steeped in information. I said to my 28-year-old daughter, how do you learn about the world? Where do you get information? And she was like, well, YouTube, sometimes Reddit, sometimes Tumblr, and nowhere in any of that did the local news, cable news, any of that. And I said, okay. Well, when something really big is happening, how do you find out about that? And she paused and she said, well, from you, Mom. You always call me up and tell me what's going on. And I'm like, okay, well, that might work for you. But, it's a brave new world. And we've got to adapt to it like you have. I mean, you're brilliant at all this stuff. Otherwise, I don't know exactly how much information, certainly I don't know how much good information is out there on YouTube. And is she going to know when it's AI generated? That's a good question.
That's another really important question for all of us to discuss. And I host these hangouts for listeners of mine. I talk to people all over the country like you do on your live radio show, and I always have. And I think it's really what I say about how do you trust in 2025 with AI and with the legacy media just crumbling pretty rapidly. How do you know who to trust? How do you know where the truth lies? And it's not perfect, but what I'm trying to sell personally and just generally for my work and in general, and what I tell my daughters is your reputation is your currency. Your credibility is your value. So for someone like me, I've been around for a while, and you can go back and see what I've covered, what I've done, what I've gotten right, and what I've gotten wrong. And you can see someone's, I think more importantly now than ever, in the world that we're living in, someone's moral clarity should be also broadcast in terms of their brand. I sometimes talk about, well, I live on Earth 1, where vaccines are a modern miracle, climate change is real, and Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Like, there are some things that there's only one side to, and I don't want to confuse people. But I covered the financial crisis. I covered the Iraq War. I've covered the immigration and healthcare fights, the attack on public education, and what I've done my whole career is I've interviewed experts because I'm an idiot. That's where my credibility lies, that I find the smartest people in the country to talk to. So that's what I tell people. Credibility lies in your reputation. And if you're a grifter, ask how people are funding their journalism. their media projects, whatever they are. Look at their incentives. Look at who they talk to, and then evaluate that credibility. And I think that's how we get to a place where we can trust certain sources. It's going to continue to be difficult. But if you've been in the business a long time too, you also have a certain standard as a journalist. Like you're not going to go to air with something that doesn't have two reliable sources, etc. I mean, there's all kinds of rules that we try to practice, that we try to live by. If you get something wrong, do you print or issue a retraction? So your reputation matters. Your credibility is your currency, and I think that is where we should be. How we should be evaluating
what you said is
new
absolutely
media.
perfect.
What do you think?
And I've already been snared once by AI. You talk about multiple sources. This was a hugely important story. It was that scuffle about the Ryder
I've
Cup.
been snared many times.
And I kept reading what this Australian guy said, and I read it here, and I read it there, and I read it there. But I'm always looking for audio, something to play on the air. And finally, I found an audio clip of him saying what all these other 4 articles had reported that he had said to reporters. But he didn't say it on camera. Somebody took all of his words and created an AI video.
I fell for the same one.
When I heard him, I knew what was coming out of his mouth was what I had read from multiple places that he said, but he had never said it on camera. So yeah, I got burned. Ugh.
I did too. Same clip. So I'm telling you, I see you. I made the exact same mistake. I caught it before I went to air with it, but I had it in my notes and in my show for a while. Luckily I grabbed it, but I've gone to air, I think, with 1 or 2 clips that were wrong. But that's the incentive is to create a video of someone saying something that if they said it, it would make huge news and it would be shocking. And so you have to learn ways to vet that out. I mean, my mom is 79 years old. She's sharp as can be. She was a public school teacher, but she falls for all kinds of stuff. She's always sending me this. Did so-and-so say this? Is this true? Is this right? So, you've got to be able to rely on journalists, producers, and editors that work together that can vet these things out, that have the time, that have the resources, that have the education and the experience, that have been burnt before. Like, we don't want to go to air with something that is untrue, that is AI generated. That is
next
bad.
time we do this,
exactly
we are going to have to book a longer
Your
time.
reputation matters.
I blew out the commercial break in the middle of our talk, and I seem to be blowing this one as well. And 1, I'm allowed to get away with. 2, I am not. Thank you so very much, Pete Dominick.
I've been there.
You can,
I get it.
Find him wherever you get your podcasts. Take care, my friend.
Sorry about that if you're still listening. I think we were talking over each other. There was an overlap there. That didn't happen in real time. It only happened here for you guys. So, yeah, screw me. A couple major mistakes the last couple days. Technically here, sorry. I know I left a lot of dead space the other day, and then the song kept playing, and someone reached out to me and said, I spend a long time trying to figure out my Bluetooth. Man, am I sorry when that happens. I really am. Very sorry. Thank you for sticking with me and supporting me. And not bailing if you haven't, if you're still here, you're still listening. I really appreciate you, bumblebees. Here at the end, thank you so much for your support. Can't do it without you. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Love you. Bye-bye.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt. Get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on.